Okay, I'm at 987 Pool Avenue in Vandalia, Ohio. We're doing a sanitary lateral inspection for the purchase of a home. Mainly what we're looking for is any structural issues, anything that would be concerning for the buyer. Our access point is a floor clean out. If you're facing the house, it's on the left side in the basement, left rear basement floor. And there is another clean out in the stack, and I would like to be able to get into that, but I did try to get it open. It wouldn't come open without me chiseling it out, and so we're just not going to attempt that. It's obviously risking damaging the pipe, so we would, since there's obviously another access, we're going to go from here. You can see, if you look, that stack is right there next to the stationary tub. And so I did try to remove the cap, but it would not come out without a little bit of extra help, we'll say. And so we're going through this floor clean out right next to where the water line comes in. And so this is cast iron. And so the thing about that is, because if you can see as you look down, the line pushes my camera to go downstream only, which means we'll only be able to inspect the line on the exterior, which is most of the pipe. It's just, it doesn't allow us to inspect the interior piping under the floor. It's about maybe 15 feet of pipe. And so I do want to start with, because it is cast iron under the floor. Cast iron does it does rust. It is obviously it is cast iron, so having a little bit of this is because it is rough. You can see, and it tends to channel like this. You see how the channel runs on the center of the pipe here. And we have some root intrusion almost immediately, as we probably switching over to clay at this point. This doesn't look like it's immediately affecting flow, but something to note with the cast iron before I get out there. The cast iron is rough, and so it is more susceptible to what they call soft clogs, which is like, excessive toilet paper. Wet wipes are a big issue just because they can catch on that, because of how rough the inside of the pipe is. And so things just catch a little bit easier. And so as long as you're just using toilet paper, it'll disintegrate if it does catch a little bit, and it'll be fine. Wet wipes don't disintegrate. Even if they say flushable, don't put them in your toilets. Don't put them in your plumbing. Just throw them in the trash if you're going to use them. They can get caught, and then if they get caught, they don't disintegrate, so they can cause things to build up behind them. So just a note on all, I give that kind of note on all cast iron. And so you're kind of looking for, functionality here. You could do a descaling, which would be running, basically you're running like a chain, kind of scraping all this rust off the inside and trying to bring it back to the normal overall diameter of the pipe. This is open and flowing, and we will try to run some water once we go all the way out. But first things first, this will need to be cleaned. This is getting to the point where you can see my camera is kind of poking a hole in those roots, and so I'm going to recommend cleaning. It looks like we have a bit of a belly here. It could just be holding water. We'll see in a minute. Sometimes if you have something that is blocking the line, you can see how now all of a sudden it's running. And so I may have kind of pushed some things along that were holding water in that area, and that kind of looks like the case. enough water would have pushed that on down, but we'll continue to go out and we'll take a look at that when we come back. So that's a little paper on the front there. A little tiny bit of roots there. Nothing you can do about that. Those are so tiny. And we have switched over to clay out of the cast iron. That's normal for this age and for this age of home. And again, the biggest thing we usually see in clay is what we've already seen, the root intrusion. And those things, you know, it's pretty common over the years. These sections are pretty short. They're about 3 feet in length. You can see there's a seam here. And then in about another 3 feet or so, 46 to 47 feet, you'll be at another seam right there. So there's just a lot of connections and a lot of room for root intrusion over the years. The packing in those joints can kind of break down a little bit and just leave. There's a lot of room in between the joints, and so they pack them, and if it shrinks up a little bit, it just allows a little bit of root intrusion. Doesn't, most cases like in this, it's not causing any structural issues. The line is holding form and, you know, open and flowing, and it just, you know, just have to be maintained regularly with either cleanings every few years, or you can put a chemical down at about once a year. The main one is called Root X. I should say the main one. It's kind of the Kleenex, kind of a brand name that you see a lot of, but there are multiple manufacturers. Okay, so we've made it all the way out to the main. And so, yeah, the line looks good structurally. You have one spot with a curtain of roots that was just a couple feet off the clean out, and so at that point, that's probably because that joint where it goes from clay, or it goes from cast iron to clay, a lot of times that is something that when it goes from cast iron to clay, there's a little bit difference. You're changing materials, and so the packing around that's a little different. So it is really common to have root intrusion at that joint between materials. So yeah, the line looks really good structurally, and as we pull back, hopefully because we've allowed some of that water to flow through, that there won't even be the small spots that we had before where the camera goes underwater. The camera lens, you can tell, is very, very low in this pipe. It's only about a ½ inch off the bottom of the pipe, and so it doesn't take much water. And so I was going to run some water, but if I do, it'll obscure the view. So probably what I can do is I can push, as I pull back, we'll make sure we can get a full inspection, and then we'll see when we get back up by the house. I may try to run some water. But if you notice how the toilet paper itself, as I go through, how it's in little tiny pieces, how it's just disintegrates, that's kind of what I was talking about earlier. How it just breaks down into little smaller pieces, and the longer it sits in the water, the more it just basically disintegrates to nothing. So it helps from getting lines. It helps to keep lines from clogging. So yeah, you have a few roots there getting in, but at that point like this, you really can't do much with that. The cleaning would just go right past it, they wouldn't even notice it. A little bit more roots. if you notice, they're all getting in at those at joints. So you have, let's see, 11 feet. And you can see now that I moved some stuff out of the way, that we were not underwater as we went through that area. So there's a small belly there. You can see that is right at the junction between the cast iron and the clay. And it's also, it looks like it goes from like 4-inch cast iron up to 6-inch clay. You can see the pipe size difference. And so that's usually because one is inserted in the other, and it kind of, you know, over the years, like I mentioned earlier, that transition can be a little bit easier when the packing breaks down to allow root intrusion. But yeah, the line looked great. You just have that bit of root intrusion right there at 11 feet. We talked about here, this isn't even a ½ an inch of water there. And so I'm not worried about that. And the reason why it's so black is that's the oxidation or the rust of the cast iron makes the water black. And so at 11 feet you have roots. Other than that, the line looked great. You can see that the cast iron is channeling, and we discussed, you know, how you can remedy that if you want, as far as descaling the line. Some plumbers have different opinions of that, just due to, in some cases, you know, you can't really tell how thin or thick the pipe walls on cast iron are, because they do rust, and unless there's some visible hole or anything, sometimes the descaling can cause, you know, you can damage the line. So some, you know, it is a service that's offered as far as, you know, descaling a line to open it up and bring it back to its original size and shape, to scrape off all that rust and mineral buildup. But, you know, there's always the chance of also, you know, damaging the line. So, but I'm going to pause the video here. I'm going to run some water, and we're going to check out, just see how well this is flowing through here, and make sure that you know, how well it's getting through for functionality. Okay, you can see the water flowing through there. Then it got there in a hurry. All the fixtures were flow tested during the home inspection. And you can see I've actually poked a little bit of a hole there in the roots, but I would go ahead and plan on having a cleaning done. You only need to go out about 10 feet. It should be fairly easy as long as I can get a good size cutter head in there, and that also would probably help with descaling at least the section here from this clean out to that point, which is only, you know, a few feet. But yeah, and so you could obviously provide the video to the plumber and see if they want to, or the cleaner, see how they feel about the condition of the line as far as doing some descaling, or as they put a cutter head through here, if they, if that would be enough. If they do that, they would have to go from that other clean out to get the whole length of the cast iron, as much of the main line of cast iron as they could. But yeah, overall the line looked really good structurally. No visual breaks or cracking or anything. You have the root intrusion getting in right at the transition between the cast iron and the clay. It's about 11 feet on the video. But only about maybe 4 feet, 5 feet from the bottom of the clean out. So I'm going to recommend a cleaning, and then everything else structurally looked great.
the line is open and flowing. I just need to take care of that little bit of roots, and then maybe in the future you could try using a chemical. Once a year is usually when they say, but I don't know how many roots are actually getting in at this point, just because of, as you can see, it's only that one really that one spot. So you could do it as some preventative maintenance. You could probably get away with, you know, a little less than once a year, but that's usually what the manufacturer calls for. It's about once a year. Put the chemical down there, and what that does is kind of burn back the roots without killing the tree or whatever is causing the roots. But yeah, so the line's good structurally, just a little bit of maintenance, and should be good. So that'll end the inspection at 987 Pool Avenue in Vandalia, Ohio.